besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a concept that was going around booktube last year. I never got a chance to do it, so I thought it would be fun to bring the trend back. Basically, the idea is that we will be discussing the worst books that I've ever read. So I went over to my Goodreads and I went to my read shelf and sorted all of the books from lowest to highest with a rating. And so basically we're going to be talking about the 15 books that are the worst according to everyone on Goodreads. I've actually done 2 previous vlogs where I read the actual worst books rated on Goodreads, so we won't be talking about those. I believe that's like 8 or 9 books that I've read that actually truly hold the title of being the worst rated books in all of Goodreads. If you want to watch those vlogs, I will link them down below. I think the first one I posted in 2018, and then the most recent one, which was a part 2, I posted a couple of weeks ago. For this list, I thought it would be fun to start with the least worst book, meaning the lowest rated book that had the highest rating out of these 15 books. So we're going to start with number 15 and then count our way all the way down to number 1, which will be the worst book on this list. So number 15 is The Husbands by Chandler Baker. This has a 3.5 average rating on Goodreads, and I personally rated it 1 star. So I kind of agree that this should be one of the lowest rated books. I did not really enjoy this. I picked this up recently. It wasn't for a vlog. I just kind of read it in my spare time between filming videos. It was not what I was hoping it was going to be. The way that this was sold to me by another booktuber who had read this and really liked it was that it was a gender swapped Stepford Wives sort of book, and I really like that sort of concept. Don't hate me, but I actually liked the movie Don't Worry Darling, and then of course I loved the Stepford Wives with Nicole Kidman. Like, I just like that kind of story. And so I was really interested in picking this up. The main premise of The Husbands is that our main character is a lawyer, and she's also a mother who is currently pregnant, and she's so exhausted and her husband just will not help her. So our main character and her husband are house hunting, and they come upon this very exclusive development where all the families are just picture perfect and all of the husbands help out so much at home. I feel like because the selling point of this book is that it's Stepford Wives but gender bent, you kind of already know what's going on, so it takes a lot of the suspense out of the main character trying to figure out what's going on in this development. And I just hated her husband so much. But then on top of that, not to sound like a woman hater, because obviously women supporting women, but I really did not like the main character because her thought process was so annoying. She was a little bit of a woman hater herself. Like, she would have one moment where she would be like, I'm a feminist and my husband should help me and I believe in equality, and then the next moment she would be like thinking like really mean things about other women around her, and she just like didn't have the best energy and she was super negative. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I just really didn't give a fuck. I just thought it was really boring and I was really underwhelmed. So it kind of makes sense to me that it would be on this list. Coming in spot number 14, we have Camp Slaughter by Sergio Gomez. This one definitely makes sense for it to be on this list. The average rating is a 3.49, but I gave this one 1 star as well. It was just so bad. This is basically a slasher where when people go to this particular cabin in the woods, there is this guy who lives out there who is kind of crazy and he likes to kill people and eat them. I like the idea of reading a slasher book, but I have yet to read one that is actually good. The writing in this was not great and there was a lot of it that was kind of questionable. The actual killer gets a POV and he is intellectually disabled, and so there is this emphasis on him kind of understanding that he's killing people but also having the mind of a child, and so it just felt kind of like icky to be using that sort of mental state as him being like this like crazy evil killer. I don't know, I just felt uncomfortable with it. I don't want to say that I'm like the expert on whether that's okay or not to write about, but I just didn't love it. There was also some weird comments about asexuality. There was like one asexual character and someone was like calling them a freak, and it was really weird because it didn't really have anything to do with the story. So in general, I just didn't really like it. And then on top of that, if you can ignore that content, the writing, like I said, was just really bad. Like, there wasn't anything about this book that I enjoyed. Like, it was just, the pacing was weird and the writing was bad and I didn't love it. Number 13 is The Assistants by Camille Perry. I genuinely forgot that this book existed. I think I read it in 2016 and I might have even put it on my worst books of the year that year, but it clearly did not stick with me until I saw it on this Goodreads ranking. I was like, huh. This has a 3.47 rating and I personally gave it 2 stars. From what I remember about this book, it's about a girl who is an assistant to a high-powered executive at a media company. And at the very beginning, she is doing some sort of transaction for the guy that she works for. There ends up being like a refund to whatever she's doing. And so she gets money back in her account because I think she used like her personal card or something. I don't fully remember how this worked exactly. And it was enough money to pay off her student loans. I don't even know why I picked it up. I think it was like on a list on Goodreads of like popular new books or something. And then I think I had like the audiobook or something. I don't really remember, but I just remember it being very underwhelming. And I'm kind of surprised I can remember that much about the plot so many years later when I truly haven't thought about this book until this very day. Number 12 is The Visitors by Katherine Burns. I actually personally gave this 4 stars. I remember really enjoying this. This book is about a woman in her 50s who is unmarried and lives with her brother. And at the start of the novel, her brother dies from a heart attack. And there's always been something very nefarious and suspicious about her brother. He always goes down into the basement and the main character is always hearing sounds down there. But she has always just decided to mind her own business. Whatever her brother's doing down there, she doesn't really care. And she just kind of like lives in La La Land. She sleeps with teddy bears. She's kind of very childlike for a woman in her 50s. And so now that her brother is dead, she kind of has to take care of whatever is going on down there. And if you can imagine, it is not great down there. It had sort of a literary fiction vibe, but then it also had some like thriller energy to it. And I remember really liking some of the reveals that happened at the end. It definitely had some good vibes to it. I'm actually kind of surprised to see it so high up on this list, so low on this list. I don't know, we're counting down to 1, but you know what I'm saying. It has like a lower rating than even the books that I was talking about before this. And I don't know, I remember liking it and I gave it 4 stars and I think I'd stand by that. I don't know if I would ever reread it. Number 11 is Like a Charm, which is an anthology that has multiple authors in it. I specifically picked it up because Karen Slaughter had been the editor for it and she wrote a story in it. It has a Goodreads average rating of 3.44, but I personally gave it 4 stars. My biggest issue with anthologies typically is that I don't love how disconnected all the stories are, but I think what made me rate this one higher is that this one is connected by this idea of a charm bracelet. And so I remember like in one story, I think there was like a murder going on and then the charm bracelet like falls off in the woods. And then in the next story, I think the next author like made someone find it in the woods. And so it was very interconnected in that way. And so I remember really liking it. Also, the stories in this anthology are very dark because they're horror and thriller, because obviously Karen Slaughter is one of the authors in this. And I just remember enjoying it. I couldn't really tell you more about it, but I give it 4 stars. So I don't know why it's so high up on this list of people hating it, but I liked it. Number 10 is Daphne by Josh Malerman. I actually read this very recently for a TBR takeover I did. I did not really enjoyed this book, spoiler alert. It has a 3.43 rating on Goodreads and I personally gave it 2 stars. This one is about a girls' high school basketball team, and basically at the start of it they're like telling ghost stories and they kind of start talking about this urban legend about this woman named Daphne who died in their town, and now it's said that if you think about her too much she'll come and haunt you and she'll kill you. And so one by one all of the girls on this soccer team start dying, and it's got a very like Bloody Mary vibe to it. And I just really didn't enjoy this because it kind of felt like young adult. It was very like coming of age. I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't my vibe. And I kind of get why it's on this list. It seems a little bit divisive. Like if you go and look at the ratings on Goodreads, you'll see a lot of reviews of one person saying they love it and another person saying they don't. And I'm one of those people who don't. So number 9 is The Asylum by John Harwood. This has a 3.39 rating on Goodreads and I personally gave it 3 stars. So we were kind of agreeing there. I am going to be so for real with you guys. I don't remember this book. I think I read it in 2016 and I don't really remember the plot. I know that it's like a Victorian setting, I think, and it's about a woman who gets placed in an asylum, but she doesn't belong there because she's not crazy. I'm having a moment where I feel like my memory is so powerful because I literally just said that I didn't remember this, and then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I do remember these details. Clearly, this book didn't leave an impression on me because I only gave it 3 stars and the average rating is 3.39. So there's not a lot to talk about here. Number 8 is Vinegar Girl by Anne Tyler. This also has a 3.39 rating on Goodreads and I personally gave it 1 star. Okay, this one, I actually genuinely don't remember everything about it, I promise. I know that it is a retelling of Taming of the Shrew, but I do remember detesting this. I remember thinking that this was really bad and being angry the whole time I was reading it. I don't really know why I finished it. I've never read any other Anne Tyler books. I know that she's like won awards and she's a really good author, but I remember at the time being like, how the fuck did this lady win anything? She's so bad at writing. But to be fair, it is a retelling of Shakespeare. Taming the Shrew is Shakespeare, right? If it's not, sorry. But I personally don't like this book, and so it kind of makes sense to me that it would be, you know, up on this list. Number 7 is Tinfoil Butterfly by Rachel Eve Moulton. This surprisingly has a 3.33 rating. I gave it 4 stars and I really enjoyed it when I read it. This is a thriller, but it's not your typical thriller, so I guess I can sort of see why certain people wouldn't like it. It's told in this very slow way, and a lot of it isn't like big reveals. It's more of like a psychological drama. It's about this girl who is on the run. This stuff happened in her past that you don't really find out until like later in the book, but we just know that she did something bad and now she's on the run. And so when we open in the book, she is hitching a ride with this random guy, and it's very clear that this guy has ill intentions for what he wants to do with her, and so she attacks him and then steals his car. So she drives away with his car, and then she ends up at this rest stop that's abandoned, and when she goes into the rest stop, she comes upon this little boy who is kind of creepy, and he wants her to help him get rid of this man that he says is bad. And so from there is a lot of stuff that happens that I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil you, but I would definitely recommend this to people who enjoy more of like a psychological book where the main character is not very reliable and we are like slowly getting pieces of her past because she's not really admitting to things like as she's telling the story. And I don't know, I really liked this. I enjoyed it when I read it. I don't really know why it's rated so low. I guess I kind of get it, like I said, because it's a little bit different, but I liked it. Number 6 is Hide by Kiersten White. This has a 3.33 rating on Goodreads and I gave it 1 star. I read this for my video where I read BookTuber's worst books of last year. So obviously I kind of went into this book knowing that people didn't like it. Like this showed up on a lot of people's worst lists last year. Like people are not loving it. This was Kiersten White's first foray into adult books, and so this is a horror novel about these people who are living in hard times, and they get invited to go be in this reality game show where they have to play hide and seek at this abandoned amusement park. It read like young adult. There was nothing about this book that felt different than YA, so I don't really know why it was listed as adult. It just was so bad. The horror elements just weren't good. I don't even feel like this book managed to be a thriller. A lot of the deaths happen off page and they're very expected because there becomes like a pattern with how they're all getting killed. And so it's like one person goes off and we're in their perspective, and then something wrestles in the bushes and then they die off page, and then we like flash to the next day where everyone's like, where'd so and so go? And then you like figure out what happened, and then the big reveal of like what was happening just like wasn't giving. And so it was quite disappointing because a book with this description, like imagine abandoned amusement park, hide and seek, like that sounds cool as fuck. I think that they should turn this into a movie and completely rewrite everything and just use Kiersten White's ideas as like just a general outline, because the book was bad, but I could see this being a good movie. Coming in at number 5, we have The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This has a 3.32 rating and I personally gave it 2 stars. So it doesn't quite surprise me that this is so high up on the list. This is a really weird book. I also recently saw the M. Night Shyamalan film, and overall I just don't think that the story was meant for me. So this is about a gay couple and their adopted daughter. They go to stay at a cabin, and while they're staying there, these random strangers show up and they basically tell them that if they don't do something, the world is going to end. And so the whole book is basically just one long conversation of them deciding if they're going to do this thing that the strangers are asking them to do. And the ending is very open-ended, which I don't always hate in horror, but this didn't even really feel like horror. I don't know what the genre was supposed to be in this book. It just felt very like, what's going on? Like, it's kind of boring. And then the movie, I honestly almost fell asleep while I saw it. We went to kind of a late showing, like when it first came out. I was visiting Elias in LA, and honestly it was just boring, and the movie was not better than the book. There was just nothing about this that was good to me. So for number 4, we have Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. This has a 3.31 rating on Goodreads, and I personally gave it 4 stars. I actually really liked this. I know it's a stupid concept. Basically, it is literally Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice with extra scenes inserted to put zombies in it. And I liked the book. I really did. I had a good time while I was reading it because last year I was sort of living my Jane Austen fantasy because I'd read all of her books last year, and so this felt like just a nice revisit to the story of Pride and Prejudice, but with zombies, and I like zombie stories, so I had a good time. Like, there definitely were like some questionable moments. This book is pretty old. It was still fun, and I've never seen the movie, but I feel like I'm gonna watch it now because I liked the book. All right, we're getting to our top 3, and coming in at the number 3 slot is After the Woods by Kim Savage. This is another book that I only vaguely remember. It has a 3.22 average rating, and I personally give it 3 stars, so I'm kind of on par with the average. From my memory, I keep saying that in this video, I feel like it's my catchphrase, but from what I remember, this book is about a girl who gets kidnapped for a couple of days and then she ends up getting rescued. And I remember she has like a best friend with like a weird backstory, and there's a random like love interest in this. It is a YA thriller, and they love putting random romance in places that it shouldn't exist. And I think I rated this 3 stars because I was irritated by the romance aspect. Like, I felt like I wanted more of just like the regular story. I don't really have much more to say. I remember little things about this book, but it wasn't memorable as a whole. And coming in at number 2, we have Dream House by Marcia Bazonian. I don't think I pronounced that right. This also has a 3.22 rating, and I personally gave it 1 star. It was very bad. One of my most popular videos of all time is me doing a 1-star rant review of this book. I got sent it by the publisher for some sort of like book tour, and I remember I reached out to the person who set up the book tour and I said, hey, like, I didn't like this book. I'm gonna give it 1 star. Do you still want me to post a review? And they told me yes. So I posted this random sit down review of it, and I just roasted it. And this brought in a lot of Marcia's fans, and they weren't happy with me. I got a lot of hate comments on this, and I actually have a video of me reading a lot of those hate comments. So if you want to watch the review, if you want to watch the video of me going over the hate comments, you can do that. But it was really funny. A lot of them were insulting my appearance. They were saying I was ugly. I didn't look that good in that video because like my makeup was weird. Also, it was like 2015. Like, who was doing their makeup good in 2015? But I remember I like wasn't looking that great in the video, and people wanted to tell me that too, because I have very thin lips, and they wanted to tell me how offensive my thin lips were to them. I'm like, I'm sorry that I'm a random white girl without lip filler. I just have thin lips, okay? Also, fuck everyone who's being so mean to me, because this book is number 2 on the worst books I've ever read. So serves you right. And the number 1 slot is gonna be a book that I feel like is gonna make a lot of sense for everyone. Like, once I say it, I feel like we're all gonna be like, that makes sense. And it is Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. This is a wildly divisive book. You either love it or hate it. It has a whopping 3.11 average rating on Goodreads, and I personally gave it 2 stars. I actually feel like that's kind of generous, because when I think back to this book, it's giving very 1-star experience, but apparently I was feeling very charitable when I was reading this. It's about the school called Catherine House, and it's a very prestigious school that if you get into it, you sort of get inducted into secrecy. Like, it's this whole thing. Like, nobody knows what goes on at this school, and the media is always like trying to figure it out, and like everyone who ends up going to the school later goes on to be like a successful politician, a celebrity, an author, just like rich after. And our main character enters the school, and the school is not what it seems. It's a little bit culty, it's a little bit weird, and so she sort of starts to uncover what's going on. It has a little bit of like a sci-fi vibe, a little bit of a haunty, scary vibe. It's a little gothic, it's a little dark academia, and it's not good. I remember feeling very underwhelmed by the reveals, feeling like the writing was a little bit weird. And if you know anything about me on this channel, I'm not a girl for weird books. Like, that's just not my personal journey. I feel like it wasn't giving what I personally look for in a book. So it makes a lot of sense for me that this would be number 1 on this list. Although I will say there's a lot of other books on this list that I feel like were worse. But regardless, I don't think about this book very often, and I don't think I ever even put it on like a worst list like when I read it. But in general, it just wasn't good. Okay, besties, that brings us to the end of this list of the worst books I've ever read according to Goodreads. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts are on them. Do you agree with Goodreads? Do you agree with me? And if you've made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed it, feel free to use the orange emoji. I don't know why I picked that out. I guess it's because the dress I'm wearing is kind of orange, but I thought of the orange emoji. And so you can leave that in your comment, and I'll know you made it to the end, and it'll be a cute little moment between us. And I just thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.